everybody, Trevor here, and welcome to another Top 5 video. Have you ever watched a show you happen to like but everyone else doesn't? Well, I certainly have, and that's the subject of today's video. My top 5 shows I consider guilty pleasures. This one was requested by Dodo Food Fight 1237, by the way. Shout out to him for the idea. For this list, I'm going to list not only stuff from my childhood, but also those that occurred in either my teenage years or adult years. Now keep in mind that these aren't necessarily my favorite cartoons in my lifetime, and they certainly aren't the best either because they do have flaws. Oh, and in terms of guilty pleasure movies, that'll be a topic for another day. So without wasting any more time, let's get this video started. Number 5. Super Duper Sumos. In case you haven't heard, this was an American show created by Deke and is about 3 sumos, each with a different skin tone and special move. And together, they go on adventures and fight against the evil corporation known as Bad Inc. Mamo, the Afro-Caribbean sumo, is the most sensible and unofficial member of the trio. He likes to cook as well as eat. His special move is Sumo Squeeze. Kimo, the Asian sumo, acts as a stereotypical samurai with a zen-like attitude. His special move is Honorable Thunderball, which involves him rolling into a ball and shoot at the opponent. Buma, the Caucasian sumo with blonde hair and a stereotypical surfer accent, is the most enthusiastic and childlike of the trio. He likes to talk about his large butt in every single episode and uses it to smash enemies, which is why his special move is called Gluteus Maximus. The real reason this is so low on the list is because, for one thing, it only ran for 2 seasons with 26 episodes total, and it got a poor score on IMDb. So, why did I add this show on the list? Well, I used to watch and enjoy this show for the most part as a kid, and I used to laugh at the butt jokes. But looking back at it now, I can see its flaws. However, I can't help but laugh at this because it's one of those surreal shows that's so bad it's actually good. Not to mention the theme song itself was hilarious despite the minimal lyrics it has. Sure, the show's animation isn't the best, even for 2000 standards, but at least it's not Adobe Flash like in Johnny Test. Overall, this show is flawed, and it could have been a lot better, but I still consider it nostalgic compared to other bad shows from the 2000s. And like I said, it's a so bad it's good kind of show. I especially enjoy Matt Hill's performance as Booma because he was the same voice actor who did Ed from Ed and Eddy. As funny as Super Duo Sumos was at the time, I still think Invader Zim was a better show in terms of humor and animation. Number 4. Salty's Lighthouse. This is not only the official US version of Tugs, but also Shine Time Station gone wrong. Let's look at the negatives first. While the original Tugs was aimed at an older audience, this one is more aimed at little kids. But that leads me to my next problem. Not only did they change some of the names and few of the genders of each character, but they even altered their personalities. For example, they made Sea-Rogue a villain instead of a good guy. And here are a couple more examples. Burke and Blair. They were scrap dealers in the original, but in Salty's Lighthouse, they were renamed Mr. Boffo and Mr. Sacco and were turned into movie makers, which makes no sense because tugboats don't work in filming industries. In terms of gender swapping, the only characters that were turned into girls were Sunshine, Captain Star, and Little Ditcher. I understand that they wanted a more broader audience just to appeal to both genders, but at the same time, like Thomas and Friends, Tugs is one of those many classic shows where gender didn't really matter to begin with. As for the name changes, I can sort of understand why OJ was renamed Otis because of the OJ Simpson controversy at the time, as well as Big Mac being called Big Stat because of the McDonald's thing, and Big Mickey being renamed to Big Basil just to avoid confusion with Mickey Mouse. However, I'm perfectly fine with their old names from the original show because that's how they originally were in the first place. But there are certain names I think don't need to be changed, like Zebedee as ZB, and Burke and Blair being Mr. Boffo and Mr. Sacco, as I said before. But hey, at least Big Mickey was called Big Mickey in the CGI Thomas series, so that's a plus. And one more thing. Because they altered the storylines of the original Tugs into new ones in Salty's Lighthouse, there are certain edits that make it look really awkward. For instance, there are a bunch of continuity errors where they have scenes where Sunshine was in his original white livery, while in other shots, he was reverted back to yellow. Not to mention that there are daylight scenes and nighttime scenes, as well as abrupt weather changes. Now, despite all the negatives, why did I decide to add it as number 4? Simple, it's what introduced me to Tugs in America in the first place. So that's one good thing. The second good thing is that I enjoy most of the voices in the show, including Ian James Corlett as Ten Cents and Zebedee, as well as French Tickner as Top Hat and Warrior. In other words, the voice cast was overall very good. Also, am I the only one who thought Ian James Corlett's Zebedee impression would fit very well for Timothy from Tale of the Brave?
But Zarin, look how tall this load is. But what if... What's wrong, Zach? What happened? Zach, look. I think my rig's too tall to fit under the bridge. Okay, I'm going. I don't think I'm gonna make it.
But there are certain voices I think could have sounded more like their original counterparts, like Izzy Gomez, for example, who sounds too American in this show. Oh, and speaking of which, did you know that the original Tugs was originally going to have a US dub with Jack Angel, Ed Gilbert, Rob Paulson, and Charlie Adler as some of the characters? But for some stupid reason, the company dropped it, and the original voices were replaced by those from Salty's Lighthouse. One more thing I do like about Salty's Lighthouse is the catchy theme song, which is like a sailor's shanty. It may not be as good as the original Tugs theme song, but I still think it's good for the ears. Oh, and have you seen the parody of the song called Shitty's Outhouse? It was originally made by a user named Thomas the Tank Moosh, and I think you should check it out on YouTube because it's hilarious as fuck. Overall, while I do prefer the original Tugs in terms of storylines, voices, and characters, but I still consider Salty's Lighthouse a guilty pleasure because it at least managed to keep my interest in the Tugs franchise. And like I said before, I enjoyed most of the American voices and the theme song. I can't help but feel nostalgic for it, so that's why it deserves the number 4 spot. Number 3, Baby Looney Tunes. I don't know about some of you guys, but I honestly enjoyed this show when I was younger because it's just like the Muppet Babies but with Looney Tunes characters. I especially like the life lessons in this series, like being kind to one another and working together in harmony. My favorite character in this show would have to be Granny, who acts as a nanny for the babies. I like her because she's not only intelligent, but also very kind and caring. She's pretty much the only character to be intact, while the rest of the characters are just babies. In terms of episodes, there's one I do find hilarious, and that's the one where Daffy Duck curses. But don't worry, it's censored, just like in the SpongeBob episode, Sailor Mouth. If there are a couple things I don't like about this show, it would be the songs because they're so generic and unoriginal. I wish they could have come up with more original songs instead of trying to be like Barney the Dinosaur. There are also certain characters like Marvin Martian who only appear in these music videos. Even though there isn't any slapstick like in the original Looney Tunes, but I still think it's a decent spin-off of the franchise because of its life lessons, characters, and animation quality. And I'm a sucker at little kids shows that do have good life lessons. It's still a better Looney Tunes spin-off than Lunatics on the Leash because that one was horrible. Number 2, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. This spin-off is basically Dora the Explorer but with Mickey Mouse and his friends. And to be quite honest, I think this show is decent. It's not as good as the original Mickey Mouse shorts or Mickey and the Roadster Racers, which is one of my favorite new preschool shows these days. But in terms of educational value, I think this was a pretty fun experience to watch. My nephew Alden loves this show, and I'm starting to enjoy it too. Yes, I know I'm not the targeted demographic for this, but it's still better than Dora the Explorer in terms of characters. The animation is also alright, not as good as in Mickey and the Roadster Racers, but it does make it look like a computer game, so therefore it could have been a lot worse. In addition, I love that Willie the Giant is one of the guest characters in the show, since he's one of my favorite underrated Disney characters. He may be dopey, but can also be very funny. Overall, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is good for kids, and I'd give it like a 7 out of 10 stars. It's not the worst show, but still not my most favorite in the Disney Junior library because I'm honestly too old for interactive learning shows like this, and that's why I prefer the other Mickey Mouse spin-offs in terms of story and character development. Before I get to my number one pick, here are a few honorable mentions. Paw Patrol. I haven't really seen the whole show yet, but judging by the clips I've seen on YouTube, I think it's kind of cute. Sure, the storytelling is fast paced, and it's like hundreds of other little kids shows nowadays, but at least it's trying to be original, unlike some other show. Tayo the Little Bus. This is also one of Alden's favorite shows when he was much littler, but it would have been number 4 due to the English dubbing being a little off at times, but aside from that, it's a decent kids show. The Donkey Kong Country Show. It's alright, although it does have its good moments like with Donkey Kong's singing voice as well as a few funny jokes here and there. But I still prefer the original video games in terms of story, music, and sound effects. And my number one cartoon I like but everyone else doesn't is Angela Anaconda. Yes, I know I'm gonna get a lot of backlash for this, but I honestly think this show is a mixed bag, or at least not as bad as what most people make it out to be. In fact, my sister and I were huge fans of this show back in the day, and we often make jokes about it too. Don't get me wrong, I can sort of understand why people hate it in terms of its bizarre and creepy looking cutout animation, but to me, I find it very unique because it's supposed to be based on the cutout segments in Monty Python's Flying Circus. Though I wish they colored in the skin instead of making it black and white, but hey, at least everything else has color. Another thing I like about the animation are the facial expressions for some of the characters, including Mrs. Brinks. I don't know, I find their facial expressions to be very funny. I know some people might find them a bit creepy, but they don't freak me out, even back then. Not to mention the theme song. It may seem irritating, but I think it's one of those so bad's good theme songs, kind of like the Super Duper Sumos one. I especially find it hilarious that Angela sings off key in this. In addition, I do like some of the humor in this. For instance, I think it's kind of funny when Angela keeps mocking Nanette by saying words like, help me, oh, Angela's so much better than I. But that's only in the dream sequences. However, sometimes the jokes don't land very well. For instance, there was one fantasy sequence where Nanette was frozen solid, and Angela says, the Eskimos are building an igloo out of you, or should I say, ugloo, as in a mix between ugly and igloo. And I was like, what? Yeah, as I said before, sometimes the jokes work, other times they don't. But if there's one thing I do have to agree with the haters on, it would be that Angela herself was a bad role model because she always fantasizes getting her revenge on Nanette and her other enemies in a more disturbing fashion. Technically, that's the running gag of the series, but at the same time, I agree that two wrongs don't make a right. And a lot of the times, I keep getting confused between the terms sociopath and psychopath. Oh, and did you know that Eddie Glenn, the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine, was in this show as Gordy Reinhardt? Personally, I thought he did a fine job with the character, but I think his Thomas impression was even better. Overall, I consider this show average. It's not the worst show of my childhood because I do acknowledge its faults, but it's definitely not as good as certain other Canadian shows like Ed, Edd and Eddy. And if you don't like Angela Anaconda, that's fine, but please respect my opinion on it, okay? I mean, just because most people hate a certain cartoon doesn't mean I have to hate it too. Besides, I've seen far worse shows than this. So there you have it, my top 5 unpopular kids cartoons. If you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave me a comment, and if you don't like it, that's perfectly understandable. But I want you guys to tell me which shows you consider guilty pleasures. And it doesn't have to be a cartoon, it can be live action too. Now, I will make a top 10 video on movies I like but everyone else doesn't, but not right away. First, I want to release a few top 3 videos that involve voices for certain Thomas characters, as well as a request from my brother-in-law Alex on something. This is Trevor Davis, signing off.